I am sitting at the round table in the break room with a bowl of Mabel's stew cooling faster than my courage. And I have never felt more like a clerk holding the balance of everything that could go wrong. You should know that the break room at the Bureau of Impossible Coincidences is not designed for comfort. It is designed for the efficient exchange of small consolations. The chairs are an assortment of policy memos folded into seats. The posters on the wall recommend calming stamps and include diagrams of permissible daydreaming. And the kettle makes a sound like a smug footnote whenever it comes to a boil. Mabel herself moves around the small room in a way that is both theatrical and inevitable. She ladles the stew while humming a rhythm that could be a prophecy if you were the sort of person who believed in soups. Her apron is dusted with flour in the places where past meals and past predictions have left residue, like fossils of comfort. She sets a bowl in front of me and then, as if reading a different book entirely, sets a smaller bowl in front of Memes. Ledger and another for Owen, and then a tiny cup with something that smells of cinnamon and of second chances for Dot. You look as though you misplaced a week and then apologize to the stapler for it, she says. It's not a question. It is a professional observation. She does not look surprised by any of this. She has fed a deputized time agent through a thunderstorm, and that will render you unshackable in my book. We eat. In a place that files reality by forms, I have learned that you either allow food to be the small human anchor, or you float away on a gale of numbered pages. Spoonful by spoonful the stew calms me. Time is a small, steady hand. The plan is not yet a plan. It is a list of promises scrawled on the table's grazy laminate. Harmon may grant an exemption. Amy will finish the emergency seals. Dot will lend a marginal trick. Owen will do what he does best and staple things together. Me's ledger will sign, but with a comment in the margin that turns her witness into something softer. And I will choose which small errors to keep. The phrase "choose which errors to keep" sits in my throat like an unfamiliar stamp. It is heavier than it appears on a requisition. What is an error and what is a mercy? The mayor's hat, now a small lobster, was a laughing inconvenience that brought the town together in a way official ceremonies never could. A rain that falls only on sad days is not a catastrophe. It is a comfort for umbrellas and for the kind of grief that needs a small, sensible shower. To decide which mistakes remain is to play God with ink. We go upstairs to Harmon's office, because that's where the humming vault key lives when it is not humming in its pocket. Harmon receives us like a man who guards a cathedral made of file cabinets. He has a face that could be used for official stamps, and a voice that makes the calendar seem like a choir. The vault key rests on his desk and hums with a sound like a large insect that has read too many footnotes. Mies. Ledger is unusual in that she can argue a regulation into submission without ever raising her voice. She does it the way one exhales, economical, precise, and punctuated with a hand that counts paperclips for emphasis. Precedent, she says to Harmon, is a useful thing until it becomes a noose. She arranges a pocket in her jacket, and her fingers close over a ledger-woven charm. I will sign as witness if you will sign the exemption. Harmon puts the humming key in his palm, and it hums like it remembers better times. He considers. You could mistake his silence for indecision, but what it is calculus. He weighs the cost of perfect continuity, sterile, polished, safe against the cost to the small human things that misfiles have birthed. He clears his throat. If you do this, he says, we will be asking the Bureau to accept a small, written catalogue of tolerated errors. This will be recorded and archived, and will carry a clause. He clicks his tongue, and the calendar on the wall flips a page. It will be an agreement of ink and will. It will require signatures from Mims. Ledger, myself, and, for it to be humane rather than hysterical, the one who caused the misfile. He looks at me like the sight of ininked palms can be a confession. You will be the one to sign, August. It hits me then, the exact point at which responsibility shifts from a concept to a tangible thing you can fold into your pocket. I am not sure I am the person to choose, I tell them. My words sound like a memo with smudged margins. Owen, who has been leaning against the bookshelf with a distracted look that could be labeled charismatic evasion, steps forward and slaps his palm once against his thigh. When he speaks, he does so like someone who closes doors with a wink. You don't have to be sure, Finch. You need to be honest. He puts his stapler on the desk like a declaration. I will commit to doing the thing that does real work rather than the thing that keeps us safe from feeling. Which is to say, he will staple. Owen has a habit of turning ideas into staples and then watching them hold. I have hoarded one stupid tie and one ridiculous memo, he says. I will staple the tie into the ledger as evidence that I am no longer hiding the file. It will be my anchor. When you are ready to designate what stays, it'll be the hand that makes the vow. Mies. Ledger's mouth does that small thing it does when she is pleased and worried at once. That is the sort of commitment I can attach a witness to, she says. Registrar Amy is waiting in the corridor with a stack of stamps like little moons. Her fingers are steady, as if the multiplication tables of bureaucracy run along her veins. She offers me a roll of emergency seals. Each one is embossed with the bureau's emblem and a counter-stamp of nothing at all, because to leave a blank in a bureaucratic life is sometimes the most honest thing you can do. I'll finish the seals, she says. They'll be ready by dusk. Make sure you pick which errors with care. The ink is cheap. Consent is not. Dot folds itself out of the edge of a marginal folder and lands on my shoulder like a forgotten postscript. It's smaller than I expected and smells faintly of coffee grounds. It arranges itself into an ellipsis and offers a fragment of paper with a single, carefully folded word inside. Maybe, it says, which could be a full sentence in sprite language. Its trick is clever and soft. If you anchor an error in a negative space, if you place a marginal notation in exactly the right uninked corner of a form, the bureau's machinery treats that notation as a permission. The negative space becomes a legal domicile. Dot whispers. It will let the slip stay as a neighbor in one room, but not in the whole house. I want to ask whether this is legal, but the question passes my lips like steam from Mabel's kettle. The law is a flexible thing in the bureau when sealed with the right stamps and the right kinds of regret. Make the negative space a clause, Harmon says. Make the clause read like a kindness. We have always used our language to protect continuity. Let us now use it to preserve mercy. Mabel arrives with another bowl. The steam lifts my eyelids and the smell of basil steadies things. You young people think of continuity like a ledger, she says, but sometimes continuity is the soup that remembers who was at the table. Keep those who make the table warm. So we sketch. The plan looks like an overcomplicated recipe. Harmon signs the exemption and hands over the humming key as a physical instrument to be part of the ceremony. Mies ledger signs as a witness but tucks a marginal notation, written in ink that changes color when read, into her signature. Ami finishes the emergency seals. Dot will fold the marginal clause into a negative space. Owen will perform the sacrificial stapling that anchors one person's error as a deliberate exception. I will choose the catalogue, the list of pleasant mistakes to remain, and sign as the petitioner who owns the mistake. We argue about what to keep. Mies. Ledger insists that any allowed anomaly must be clearly bounded. An apology left on a staple is harmless, she says, tapping the ledger in front of her. A lobster mayor who becomes a companion is less harmless, but there is a human good there. Bound it. Name it. Give it a timestamp. Owen says that a certain rain that falls only on sad days ought to be kept, because he remembers carrying an umbrella for a stranger once, and it rained on their confessions only. I think of my mother's calendar where birthdays were cross-hatched to compensate for a life of careful scheduling. Keep one thing that surprised you into happiness, I say. Keep one small error that is kinder than the original plan. There is a silence that isn't empty. It is full of counting paperclips. Harmon flips his calendar with a practiced hand and finds an old stitched page where, some years ago, Someone else had once written in an allowance for a festival that never should have been allowed. Fine, he says, we will permit compassion within a clause, but it will be documented. The agreement must read, we will reseal sequence, accepting the following enumerated phenomena, each bounded by time, place, and scope. Time, place, and scope, Mies. Ledger repeats. She adds, and the clause will be written in 2 inks, one ordinary, one sympathetic. The sympathetic ink will fade if the anomaly causes harm beyond its bounds. She looks at me. You will decide, August. You will be the measure. I taste the stew and it tastes like a ledger forgiving you for misfiling your childhood. The strange part is that I do not feel heroic. I feel careful and afraid and curiously tender. To choose is to make a shape for memory. To bind that shape is to let the future argue with you. But it must be done. Registrar Amy finishes the seals that afternoon. She stamps them in a rhythm I can recite now in my head. The first seal is for restoration, the second for mitigation, the third for exception. Each makes a noise like a tiny heart. She hands me the roll. Don't be timid with the list, she says meaningfully. We practiced the ritual once, like actors before opening night. Owen staples an old tie into a scrap of ledger to feel the motion. Mies ledger writes a witness note in the margin and tucks a charmeuse ribbon through the thread. Harmon holds the humming vault key over the assembly like a benediction. Dot circles like a paper mouth and leaves a trail of helpful coffee-stained diagrams on the table. There is an intimacy to ritual. Even the Dreest proceedings at the Bureau are soft, when the people performing them care about the small things. We are not heroes. We are clerks with a willingness to keep certain human messes. That is its own kind of bravery. At dusk, I write my catalogue. It is not long. The things I will petition to keep are the lobster mayor's companionship, the rain that attends sorrow, and a sandwich that remembers kindness. Each entry is bounded. The lobster may engage in civic duties only in small, ceremonial contexts and must not be permitted to run for office. The rain will be restricted to private streets and will not interfere with public infrastructure. The sandwich's memory may be shared verbally, but not legally weaponized. I do this with a trembling hand. Each line feels like a promise and a penance. We seal the agreement of ink and will with a careful ceremony of stamps. Harmon presses the humming key against the page and it sings a note like an answering footnote. Mies. Ledger signs as witness and tucks her marginal notation into the negative space. Registrar Amy slaps the final emergency seal into place. Dot folds itself into the margin like a ribbon and writes maybe in sympathetic ink. Owen steps forward, ties the tie to his chest like a flag, and then solemnly staples it through the ledger with a dramatic flourish. He looks ridiculous and brave at once. I sign. My signature looks like a policy grappling with a poem. The humming key quiets. The air in the room changes in the way it does after a storm. There is a clean, charged smell and the feeling that something heavy has been set down. We all breathe. Mabel refills bowls and offers a piece of bread. You did what was needed, she says, enough to make the building sleep. And that is the plan. Harmon will authorize the dissent. Mies ledger will sign as witness and be less stern for the rest of the week. Registrar Amy will deliver the seals and keep a glazing smile for a month. Owen will staple something else besides jokes into his life. Dot will tuck its marginal trick into our paperwork so that the slip has a room and not a tenancy. I will carry the catalogue in my pocket like a little allowed sin. But the thing with plans is they are invitations. They invite perfection, and perfection is the sort of thing that wants to tidy the world until it forgets why it loved certain messes. We have not made the world perfect. We have made a bargain. We have written a list of small mercies and given them legal shelter. When I leave Harmon's office, the building smells of toner and distant thunder in that particular way it does after we have agreed to act. The lamps in the corridor burn with bureaucratic patience. The elevator sits cold and obedient. We will go down tomorrow. The basement of amendments awaits like a place where mistakes are embalmed and sometimes mated with second chances. I fold the catalog into my blazer pocket next to a packet of emergency seals and a folded piece of Dot's coffee stain diagram. It is strange how small the thing that feels like responsibility can be when you carry it. It is lighter than guilt and heavier than a receipt. At the dorms. Ledger places a hand on my shoulder. "You might be afraid," she says. "Good. It keeps you honest." Owen gives me a look like a man promising he will be less trivial. "Remember," he says, "it's not about saving the world. It's about keeping the parts of it that make us want to stay." I walk back to the break room with a list of mercies in my pocket and the sound of Harmon humming in my ear. The plan is in place. The stamps are ready. The sacrificial stapling is scheduled. The agreement is inked. The key hums like something that knows how to close a door. But there is a soft, absurdal feeling at the back of my mind, the impression of a smudge shifting at the margins, like someone clearing their throat before an encore. The slip has not been eradicated. It has been constrained, bargained with, given a room. It may yet decide that rooms are too constrictive for a being of its temperament. I go to sleep that night with the catalogue under my pillow like a child with a talisman. I dream of staplers that keep diaries and calendars that apologize. In the morning, the building will be quieter than it has been for several chaotic days. The descent awaits. The basement's doors are old and smell of redaction and glue. We will open them. I do not know if our plan will hold. I only know that the making of the plan changed us. It made me's. Ledger softer in ways that will make her more dangerous to the idea of harm. It made Owen steadier. It made Harmon willing to hum a little louder. It made me, for the first time in my brief career, willing to sign a paper that is both a correction and a mercy. We have inked an agreement of ink and will. The next page will be the descent. The world is not fixed, it is negotiated. We are about to negotiate its basement. And if you are asking whether I am terrified, yes. If you are asking whether I am ready, I think so. The stamps are lined up like soldiers and the stew has been eaten. The tie has been stapled. The key hums, the slip, somewhere in the margins, is perhaps smiling. We will go down in the morning. But first, there is a sound from the corridor and elevator's bell struck twice, the exact signal Sally uses when a temporal flaw wants company. That bell is as polite as a warning. It says, in its own bright way, the day is not waiting. The basement will not wait. The slip is a patient antagonist, and we are, in our fashion, impatient clerks. I fold my hands on the table, feeling like a petitioner and a conspirator at once. I sign my name Inu on the copy of the agreement I keep folded in my pocket and promise myself two small things. I will not try to make everything tidy again, and I will not let terror make the choice for me. I will choose the things that make the world stranger and kinder. That is the best resolution I have to offer. We will see if it is enough. The last thing Mabel says before we leave is a sentence that reads like a hook you hang on the next chapter. You kids are going to the basement with a humming key and a soup-stained list. Remember, doors open both ways, and as the elevator bell rings, I feel the brief, precarious thrill of a story about to be lived wide open. I have always thought of filing as a promise. When I was small, my parent would slide a photograph into an envelope and put it on a shelf and say, "We are promising to remember this when it is inconvenient." That sounded noble as tying a ribbon. The bureau taught me, within 2 very short weeks, that filing is not only promise. Filing is leverage. Filing is armor, and sometimes it is a cudgel. And in the basement where the amendments live, filing becomes something close to prayer. Sally pressed her forehead to the elevator's little pane and checked her watch, as if she were about to fold time itself into half and tuck it under her tongue. The elevator smelled of old varnish and shoe polish and the faint, stubborn perfume that follows people who have been standing next to files for a very long time. The light inside the car hummed like a throat clearing. Somewhere above us, a clock that did not belong to any known floor coughed politely and went on. I had learned to be small in elevators, attend to breaths, avoid humming bureaucratic jingles out loud, because elevators here preferred quiet company. Sally looked back at me, and I felt seen the way one feels visible to someone who knows hazardous staircases by heart. "Time it right, Finch," she said, and the sentence was not so much an order as a benediction. Her fingers, which were as practiced as the hands of a pianist, but made of different colices, tapped the sequence of buttons twice. Once to ask the floors to cooperate, once to request mercy. The car sank with a hush that made my stomach think the bureau itself might be swallowing us whole. When the door opened, it felt like the mouth of a library, where the librarian had misremembered whether it was morning. Light fell in strips across rows of boxes like altar beams. The basement of amendments is the place they sometimes mentioned in passing, the place interns whisper about over tea, as if it were a ghost story you whispered to feel less frightened of the office printer. Only it is not a story, it is a repository. It is where the bureau places the things it once wanted to forget. Boxes were stacked like sleeping towns, each labeled with dates that insisted they had existed and had not, with redactions that still exhaled ink, with stamps that had learned to sing in tiny minor keys. Machines hummed in corners as if to remind the world that even discarded machinery keeps its rituals. There was a smell toner, of course, and paper, but also something like citrus peel left in an open ledger for too long, and the faint, almost sweet tang of erased ink. The scent made me dizzy in an appropriately bureaucratic way. Harmon stood waiting for us, as if he had always been waiting. He is a man who carries history like a tidy coat. The edges are neat but heavy. He held the vault key between finger and thumb, and it seemed to vibrate with memory. The key did not clang. It thrummed. If you pressed it to your ear, you could almost hear the sound of signatures being made in other rooms. "August," Harmon said, his voice the exact volume a building uses when it means its walls to carry news. "We have the exemption. We have the authority. We do not have infinite time." I thought of my parents and their envelopes. I thought of a childhood town where calendars were iron. I thought of my sandwich from Tuesday that swore it had once been someone else. All of those things stacked in my chest as if I were trying to put a new stamp on a stubborn envelope. Me's ledger moved around the table like gravity. There are professions that make people agreeable. Hers makes you think she has always been a ledger. She produced signatures with a kind of surgical patience. Ink permeated her fingertips like a confession, and when she laughed it was quiet and guilty in the parts of me that wanted everything to be predictable. "Owen," she said, "have you got the tie?" He produced it from within his coat the way men sometimes produce solutions, with a flourish and an apologetic smile. The tie was old, smelled faintly of other rooms, and had a constellation pattern so improbable that it seemed to chart the bureau's own minor galaxies. He laid it on the table, smoothed the knots as if apologizing to the fabric for the trouble it would have to endure. "Emotional latch," he joked, but his hands were steady. He was not laughing entirely. Who was the size of a folded page, and had a halo made of coffee stains perched on a marginal note like it was a high altar. Her ellipses twitched. Mr. Pockets dropped an orphaned glove on the table with the solemnity of a man presenting an offering. The glove smelled of rain and left behind afternoons. It would be the bait. The plan, such as it was, depended on ritual and paperwork. The bureau is an office of rituals decorated with rubber stamps. If you gave a novice a stapler and a conscience, they could, with enough formality, alter weather patterns. Our trap would be ceremonious, a signature loophole Harmon had carved from an old policy, Mies. Ledger's witness mark, an exemption authorized by Harmon, Owen's sacrificial stapling literal and symbolic, and Dot as a marginal anchor, eating just enough of the slip's curiosity to tie it down to one page. The irony is that the thing we feared most was not the slip's mischief, but our own zeal. For decades the Bureau had believed that continuity was safety. Continuity says you can comfort a child with "it will be the same tomorrow." But continuity also erases the stray bright stitches that make life wearable. We had, all of us, made a career of smoothing edges. Now we were being asked to preserve a few. Harmon turned the humming key in his palm like a man turning a rosary. "We are authorized to perform the reseal," he said. "We are not authorized to make all mistakes permanent. We must decide which imperfections are human and which are hazardous." "A list, Mies," Ledger said, already with a pen. She was thinking in columns. She always thought in columns. "We're not administrators of taste," Owen said, but he was smiling in a way that let me know he wanted very much to be. "We are administrators of consequence." The table was laid out with care. Forms were stacked like the layers of the world's own scab. Each sheet had margins for signatures and for marginalia. There are, I learned here, entire subforms devoted to small, beneficial anomalies. We had a page of examples that affectionately catalogued the mayor's lobster, the rain that only fell on sorrowful afternoons, the stray Tuesday that preserved a romantic memory. There were other things on the list, too, absurdities that made the town kinder, or at least more interesting. Somebody had written, in a cramped, fond hand, "Keep anything that makes a child giggle without harm." My job, unexpected, terrifying, and distinctly official, was to choose which errors would we allow to remain, which would we consign to the humming vault, where the rejected corrections live and rot into lessons. Choosing was not a matter of taste. It was a moral ledger. It was arithmetic and theology folded into a single checkbox. "You understand," Harmon said softly, "that any error we keep we put into the public ledger. It becomes a legitimate footnote in reality. There will be hearings, there will be questions. There will be citizens who object." I thought of the mayor and his lobster hat, an image that had lodged in everyone's throat like a cherry pit. I thought of the intern whose earlier self had wandered the hallways, smiling because she remembered being loved by someone who had not yet fallen in love. I thought of my sandwich and how it had insisted, with great dignity, on having a prior life. I thought of Owen's file, the one he would rather chisel than archive because it contained something inconveniently beloved. "Mies." Ledger tapped her pen. "We do this carefully," she said. "We choose what makes living bearable and humane. We protect the rest." The word human felt like an instruction manual and a hymn. Humane, I thought, was not the same as perfect. Sally returned with the elevator scheduled to take us down a floor deeper, to the seam where the bureau's institutional memory met its pile of shame. "Timing is everything," she murmured. "Don't be late to be early." We descended. The deeper you go, the more the light becomes a language you must learn. It is dimmer, yes, but also more honest. The machines down there hummed a lower, older note. The redactions had a brittle texture that made the inside of my mouth taste of old stories. We walked between stacks of amendments that had been labeled with dates that were not quite right, with stamps that had been corrected by other stamps, like a palimpsest of clerk's grief. We stopped before a heavy door, bronze and dented, with a placard that read, "Former errata, do not feed after midday." It looked as though it had been mocked up to be dramatic for visitors. It was not mocked up. Its hinge was greasy with decades of fingerprints. Harmon put the vault key to the lock, and it sang like a throat clearing when you have a lot of things to say. The door opened with a sigh, revealing a chamber that smelled like the attic in a house you forgot you had loved. There were shelves of books that had been declared unnecessary, boxes of petitions that were polite even as they pleaded, a filing cabinet that still hummed lullabies. We set the ritual out on a table in the center of the room. Harmon produced the exemption document, stamped with a seal I had seen only in my dreams, and in the ledgered nightmares of interns who survive long enough to become supervisors. "Mies." Ledger placed her witness stamp with a deliberateness that made it an oath. Owen set his tie across the page and produced the stapler he had brought for this very purpose. The stapler is a sacred object in our work. It can fasten two ideas together, or it can tear the seam. "All right," Owen said. When I staple, I will be fastening the emotional latch. This is symbolic but also practical. The tie will bind a memory to the margin, and the staple will be the fulcrum. If it works, the slip will be held to the page it prefers. Dot hopped onto the marginal note and nibbled at it as if tasting the plan. Her ellipses left faint crumbs. She looked at me with a small, coffee-creased face that somehow expected to be rewarded. "You will choose the errors," she said in punctuation, which is to say she made a face that meant, "It's a lot, huh?" I had imagined choosing. I had not imagined the size of the list. It was a ledger's worth of minor mercies, the lobster mayor, the rain that listened, the stray weekday where a romance was preserved, the anonymous postcard that always found the lonely, the streetlight that never failed when a child was learning to ride a bike. Each had a note beside it: beneficiary, harm assessment, precedence, recommended status. There were columns that said aloud and others that said erase. Pemberley Ledger, God bless her horological heart, had even added a column called Humanity Index. Her handwriting was neat and felt like an act of affection. Harmon watched me with the kind of patience that has watched entire seasons pass through a calendar. "You must ask yourself," he said, "what will make people kinder, and what will make systems brittle. You must ask the difference between wonder and disorder." The slip, I thought. The slip had never wanted to destroy. It wanted to nudge, to tilt, to add a spoonful of salt where recipes were becoming bland. Choosing which of those nudges to keep felt like being given the task of picking which stars could remain crooked in the sky. "We will be under time constraints, Ledger reminded me gently. "There is a noon stamp. This chamber aligns with the lunch hour rezeal. The gentler fixes take less energy. The more consequential the error, the more signatures required, and the more risk we take." There was a part of me that wanted to resign. There was a part of me that wanted to check erase on everything, to return the town to schedules and soft edges, to make my parents' calendars proud. There was another part of me, a thinner, louder voice that had been fed by nights reading comic books and catalogues of oddities, all those things that made living less like a list and more like an anthology. Which errors were kindness and which were cruelty? The question sat on my tongue like an unsigned memo. I opened the list. I tasted ink, because sometimes choices in the bureau feel engon as paper to a clerk's palate. My handwriting betrayed me and trembled. I thought about the mayor and his unhealthy dignity. I thought about the lonely postcard and the child learning to ride. I thought about Owen's file and the small, stubborn beauty of a mistake kept alive for sentimental reasons. I could keep the lobster, and perhaps the mayor would be better at listening. Perhaps the lobster would become a mascot who chewed through civic pomposity. I could preserve the rain that fell on sorrow, which was less meteorology than mercy. I could save the week that let two people remember their better selves. Harmon cleared his throat. "We will never be pure," he said. "We will always be a compromise. But perhaps we'll be more honest if we admit that now." Mies. Ledger put her palm on my forearm in a way that said, "You belong here now whether you like it or not." It felt like a transfer of responsibility and a blessing. Dot nuzzled the marginal note, and something in me wanted to let everything that made people gentler remain. But I could imagine a world where too many anomalies made systems fall apart, where schedules unraveled into chaos that hurt, not helped. I closed my eyes and tried to see each possibility as a person. The lobster mayor was not merely an oddity. He could be a figure of civic humility. The rain that fell on sorrow might be the difference between a day of grief and a day of despair. The week that shifted. That was the one that preserved a memory of warmth when a relationship would otherwise have dissolved under the weight of schedule. Owen's hands were steady when he picked up the stapler. He looked at Mies' ledger, and she nodded. Harmon had his key ready. Sally checked her watch again, which was both a comfort and a countdown. The room smelled like all the foods of precaution: coffee, paper, the faint heroism of cheap stew leftover from a staff lunch. "Are you ready?" Owen asked, and his voice seemed to compress time. I was not ready. I had never felt more like an intern. I felt my age, my blunders, my entire amateurish sincerity sitting on the table like another form to be stamped. Yet the truth of the bureau is that its interns are sometimes its choices. Someone must sign. Someone must pick the small, human things to keep. I placed a tentative mark in the allowed column, one. Then another. My hand did not shake as much as my mind, which was good. A rhythm formed. We decided to keep the lobster mayor, because what use was a city that could not laugh at itself on occasion. We permitted the rain that fell for the sad, because it seemed a minor and rare mercy. We kept the stray weekday that saved memory. We allowed the anonymous postcard. We preserved a street light, and we let Dot write herself an allowance in the margin, because somewhere in the slow machinery of the bureau, small creatures deserved to matter. Owen, Harmon said, we will staple in 3. He placed the tie across the page like an ancestral sash. The stapler met paper with a sound that echoed like an oath. The staple went in and anchored the emotional latch in the center of the exemption. It made the page feel heavier and, oddly, warmer. The tie's fibers sighed. For a moment I thought the slip might object. For a moment I half expected the room to tilt and for every marginal note to unwrite itself in protest. Nothing dramatic happened. The machines hummed, the staple held. Dot made a pleased sound and ellipses that glittered like a tiny applause. Harmon turned the humming key and placed it on the exemption sheet like a final seal. Miss Ledger made the witness mark with a flourish that made the paper blush. We had done it. We had performed ceremony and chosen charity. But ceremony in the bureau is seldom absolute. The door beyond the chamber stood slightly ajar, and through the gap I saw a smear on the wall where ink had been rubbed away. The smear winked like a sleepy thing. It did not fleege. It did not rated, which was worse. We had stapled. We had authorized. We had chosen. The descent had not ended. It had only begun. We would have to walk back up and face the building and its noon, and with it the consequences of our choices. The slip would notice. The city would notice. And perhaps some parts of me would never be tidy again, ready to climb. Sally asked, glancing at her watch as if it were a compass and noon a far-off lighthouse. We lifted the exemption, and the air felt thinner on the edges, as if reality had been tuned and would, in the next moments, either sing an honest note or cough up something unexpected. I tucked the page into my blazer, as if I were carrying a fragile animal. The basement's machines hummed in their minor keys. The tie smelled faintly of other rooms. Dot tucked in a corner of the marginal note and chewed with satisfaction. Harmon's key vibrated like a small, contented thing. We turned toward the elevator. The chamber door creaked as the smear on the wall watched. I felt like I was leaving a church after a complicated mass, or perhaps entering one. My hands were ink-smudged. My head was loud with decision. As the elevator began its climb, Sally caught my eye. "Noon is honest," she said. "It asks you. It does not care about excuses." I tried to polish the edges of my courage with a bureaucrat's neatness, but courage does not polish, it reveals. The elevator rose. The light shifted. On the ride up I tried to rehearse the sentences I would give Ms. Ledger, Harmon, Owen, and perhaps the town itself. I practiced being both small and responsible, and in the practice I discovered that those were not contradictory. You can be small and still hold something large. When the doors opened, the office smelled like tunner and distant thunder, and all the rituals rising for the reseal at lunchtime. People were finishing forms and pretending not to notice the way clocks kept their own private time. Somewhere a kettle began to boil. Between desk and coffee machine, the world awaited our report. We had descended, we had chosen. We had an exemption stamped with a humming key and a stapled tie and a file sprite that had eaten part of the slip's appetite. We had bound the errors we were willing to keep to paper, and in doing so, we had promised to explain them to a public that rarely likes surprises, even when surprises are mercies. The slip, I knew, would be clever when it noticed the clasp. It did not like loud ceremonies. It liked half smiles and margins and that quiet moment when a clerk's hand hesitated over a requisition line. We had been ceremonious. The slip favored the margin. I expected it to respond in that low, sly register. Its protest would be written in crumbs. Its mischief would be a smudge that earned a story. We walked back into the bright offices and the noise of a midday that was, in most respects, ordinary. But nothing would be entirely ordinary again. I had made a list that read like a map of small mercies. I had signed off on a few of them with ink and with the faith that small mercies are sometimes the only kind that survive the particular cruelty of schedule. Mies. Ledger folded her hands and let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a prayer. Harmon slid the humming key back into his pocket, where it hummed like a secret. Owen wiped his hands on his coat and looked at me like a man who had just given away his one extravagant possession and discovered he felt lighter. "We're not done," Harmon said, "but we have begun. The beginning, I discovered, is a dangerous place in the Bureau of Impossible Coincidences. It holds all the possibilities and all the complaints. Down there, among the amendments that had been refused, it found that decisions are a kind of generosity. To choose to keep an error is to protect its beneficiaries. To choose to erase an error is sometimes to keep systems from fraying into cruelty." As we filed back into the day, the hum of the building deepened. The noon bells would be chiming in moments. There would be signatures to explain, memos to write, a public to placate, and perhaps a mayor who would have to learn to wear a lobster with dignity. I had a page in my blazer and a stomach that felt like a ledger being closed. I told myself that being an intern had simply become, in a hurry, something more serious. The elevator climbed. The building pulled us back into its ordinary tasks. The smell of toner and distant thunder wrapped around everything like a familiar cloak. When the doors opened, there was light and the clangor of lunchtime. People glanced up with the hurried politeness of those who have been saved from a minor apocalypse. We had descended to the amendments. We had stapled an emotional latch. We had chosen the small, human errors we would attempt to protect. The slip would not be happy. But it is never happy when humans attempt to make decisions that include mercy. When I returned to my desk, ink smudged and oddly steadier, I found a sticky note I had written to myself the week before. On it I had scrawled, in a hand that was both uncertain and hopeful, "Be brave. Be careful. Remember to feed the file sprite." I smiled, folded the note into the file labeled "Maybe," and sat down to begin the paperwork that would explain why a city might need a small lobster at its helm. There was, of course, more to do. We had stapled a tie and signed an exemption, but the real work, writing the letters, answering the citizens, keeping watch over the errors we had preserved, would be carried in the margins. It would be an aftercare program of sorts, watchful, attentive, human. I had descended. I had learned that choices in the Bureau are never purely mechanical. They are moral instruments, and they sing. If you listen, you can hear them. If you listen well enough, they will tell you which errors are gifts and which are excuses. And if you do not listen, you will, as I had once done, misfile a form and set a Tuesday loose in last Thursday. There is a small, foolish joy in knowing you can help fix what you have broken. There is a larger, quieter joy in discovering that sometimes breaking things preserves them, in a way that neatness never could. The noon bell would chime soon. We had sealed our little covenant in the basement, with a stapled tie and a humming key and a list of small mercies. The slip, patient and smudged, would watch from the margins. It would learn, perhaps, that bargains can be struck, or it would learn that even bargains are instruments for new mischief. Either way, we had descended. We had chosen. We would now have to live with what we had decided, and that is the practical, peculiar work of anyone who files reality for a living. I breathed in. The office smelled of toner and distant thunder, and under it all of stew. I felt the weight of the exemption in my blazer like a small animal that might purr or might bite. I tried to be both brave and careful. That is what the basement of amendments had taught me. We are, always, making promises with our stamps. Sometimes those promises ask us to choose which mistakes are beautiful enough to keep. The bell struck once, then twice. Mies. Ledger tapped a line of ink with her pen as if closing a wound. Harmon adjusted his spectacles. Owen tucked his tie into his pocket. Dot popped a small crumb from the margin into its mouth and made an approving ellipsis. And I, August Finch, intern and reluctant covenant maker, stood and followed them back toward the noon that asked questions and the lunch that would seal answers. The descent had been a beginning. Now we climbed, carrying our small, weighted decisions into the sunlight where the city could complain, celebrate, and perhaps, in some corners, be a little kinder. When we emerged, a clerk was already handing out memos about minor anomalies, phrasing them with the gentleness of a nun and the precision of a lawyer. I read them later, when I had a minute between forms, and found our work softened by paper and by the fact that someone had placed a lobster emoji beside the mayor's name and then, to my everlasting relief, drawn a small heart in the margin. It was not the end. It was not meant to be. It was merely what the Bureau does: file, tend, negotiate, and occasionally, when Noon asks with an honest face, make a choice that keeps a little bit of wonder in the world. The slip would notice. The slip would reply. But for now the tie was stapled, the key hummed, and the list of humane errors was folded neatly into a folder labeled maybe. That morning I had descended into the Bureau's oldest seam and returned carrying a small cannon of choices. I had not become wise. I had only become less frightened of being wrong in ways that might also save someone from an otherwise colorless life. We climbed up and walked into noon. The hook which everyone in the Bureau respects is this: our decision would not be final until the city had had time to make its own small, public noises. The slip who loves margins would never be entirely satisfied. The real test was not in the basement, but in what happened when ordinary life met our chosen anomalies. I clipped the exemption into my blazer, and when the bell chimed its third and final note, the stapled tie betrayed a faint, contented creak. The basement hummed behind us, and ahead, the world waited to see if it had room for a few more tiny miracles.